Hello everybody, it's Lorraine Alternative Homesteading on November 26, 2025. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for subscribing and welcome newcomers. I'm going to continue reading. This will be part 3 of the Rat Snitches. Alright, Gang Stalking Part 3, Rat Snitches Guide, and we'll continue. What to do if you believe a snitch is personally targeting you. Well, let's assume that you suspect, but aren't sure, that someone in your circle is a snitch, and worse, you think the person is or even might be targeting you. What do? Again, get away from the person. Do not try to outsmart the person. Do not feed the person false information, because if that person is an undercover agent, this could be a crime in and of itself. Do not commit violence against the person. Just get away, even if it means leaving the group. If you think you've already said or done something compromising with this person, see a good lawyer and read the section of this booklet on how to conduct yourself if you get arrested. The other tip from this owner's book, Helpful Attorney, is consider making your own complaint to the authorities about this nutball, the person you suspect of being a snitch. This A, puts you on the record as not being in bed with the snitch, and B, alerts the snitch that his handlers that you're aware of him and are thus less likely to be an easy target. C, creates an appearance that you're not one of the bad guys since you're not hiding anything. And D, maybe with a little luck the snitch ends up in jail himself or herself for some time. I would not consider this. Do not try to outsmart, describe above, which I agree with. Of course, if he turns out not to be a snitch, you may have harmed an innocent person by calling the cops on him. It's a risk, but if the person really is an agent of the government, this can be a pretty good act of self-protection. Oh, and one of my friends, who speaks from experience, points out that if you're going to report a snitch to the cops, it's best to do it through a lawyer. Otherwise, you're talking to cops, which is a no-no. Most of the lawyers are corrupt. Anyway, if you're having to report a snitch, a neighborhood snitch, the local lawyers are already aware of it. Let's see. Now there's a little box here. By the way, this is written by Claire Wolfe. She writes an old joke, but sterling strings right. Back in the Soviet Russia, twin brothers were born. They slept in the same crib. As they grew older, they went to the same schools and entered the same military duty side by side, and after the military they started to work next to each other in the same factory. They were actually married on the same day and raised their families next door to each other in the same apartment building. The years go by and the brothers find themselves as old men sitting on a park bench sharing a bottle of vodka. What do you think of the new reforms they keep talking about? Asks one brother. Nayat, says the other. One of us might be KGB. As I said, old joke, but an element of truth. The sad reality is everyone has their version of the, quote, 30 pieces of silver, unquote. Pressure on a family member, fear of jail time, exposure of a dark secret, anybody could be turned. The trick is in riding the fine line between necessary trust and overextending yourself and putting yourself at risk. Personally, I'm in favor of compartmentalizing information. Discuss X with one person or group and share Y with another group, and keep your yap shut about Z. Also remember that the internet is the greatest snitch out there. Every click, every search, every action can be recorded. I have no evidence that it's being done successfully, but it can be done. That's enough for me to never get a single point of entry to the world www. Visit the public library for some of your local coffee shop or more. Do some lightweight stuff at home and don't surf and research at the same time. Find stuff, data, dump it to a secure source, and read it later. If you find it irrelevant, trash it then. Heads down, eyes up. Part 2, A Snitch Uncovered. If you believe there's a snitch in your group. We talked about how to recognize snitches and what you, as an individual, should do to protect yourself. Again, we have to stress that there are no magic bullets. You might be blindsided and severely damaged by a snitch despite your best instincts and best efforts at OPSEC. The advice in this booklet can lessen the chance of that, but nobody can give you any guarantees. Let's say, though, that you believe that you've spotted a snitch, and this snitch is not only in a position to harm you, but also a group you belong to, whether that be a bunch of dope smoking friends, a group of hobbyists or gun owners, or activist political organization or religious group. The first thing to do, as we've said before and will say again, is to get away from that person and his or her influence. However, now you've got other people to worry about. Some members of your group may be absolutely innocent. Some may be blabbermouths or edgy types who are walking stupidity into the snitch's trap. Some may be friends with the snitch and hostile to anybody who expresses doubts about that person. Some may even be associates in the snitch's plan to bust you. It's not unusual for government agencies to plant multiple agents into one's operation, and the bitter old joke that, if not for the snitches, some meetings would be empty, isn't that far from wrong? So what do? Document your suspicions. If possible, conduct some careful, subtle investigation to see if your suspected snitch's background and life matches her claims. Does she really live where she says? Has she been seen with police? Do her statements about her education or her friends hold up? If not, you may not have a snitch, but you have an untrustworthy person for sure. Share your specific reasons for suspicion with people in the group that you trust. Yes, we know that snitches destroy trust, so be very careful when choosing one or two others to confide in. If you can do so without violating your state's laws, quietly begin video or audio taping all interactions with the suspected person. If state wiretapping laws forbid recording without the consent of all parties, then at least consider openly recording meetings to counteract any lies the snitch may tell his handlers. Start a, quote, facts, acts, and circumstantial file. After each incident, write the details down. Facts are the time, date, occasion, incident, characteristics of the person. Acts are what they did. Circumstantial is the impression and anything odd about the situation. Use the FAC file and keep notes from unsettling situations and see if a pattern emerges. Now, in this book, she writes, note that this item also appears in Appendix 2, where you will find details on how to do this, along with many other common sense OPSEC tips. Do not make open accusations unless you have proof positive of snitchery or copness. As when a New York Libertarian Party activists spotted a former suspicious member in the New York Times helping the FBI with an arrest. Discuss with your most trusted associates what to do. Just as with your first individual move is to keep away from the suspect individual, the best group action may be to simply shut the person out. Stop talking with them. Stop inviting them to meetings. Stop asking them to be involved. In projects, freeze them out of all activities and discussions. In a serious case, you may end up having to shut down the entire group to foil a snitch or agent provocateur. If so, have a plausible excuse if you can. Always make sure that you and the other on the up and up members of your group remain on record as not advocating illegal, and in particular, violent illegal activities. Get a blog, a Twitter account, a Facebook page. Make your opposition to certain activities clear and public. And I pretty much did that. I created a Facebook page for this town. There wasn't anyone that existed prior to my moving here. And I said, hey, town needs a Facebook page where I'm not going to be censored like in the local newspapers and the slander that's spread about me. Furthermore, make sure you stay on record as not advocating things that the snitch wants. Do not line up behind or even pretend to agree with that person's policy, recommendations, strategies, or tactics. Remember, you may well be being recorded. You do not even want to appear superficially agree with things an undercover operative is trying to talk to you into. Again, finally, you may have to recognize that you can neither help nor save those who do not wish to be helped or saved. It may be that your final act has to be turning your files over to some other trusted member of the group and leaving. You always have a chance of finding another group. You're not going to have a chance to find another you. And that's really important. That's true. One interesting, though dangerous, way to ID snitches. In his youth, Steve was a member, this is an example, Steve was a member of a number of groups that attracted the attention of cops and snitches. There were so many iffy hangers-on that the tiny core of solid people weren't sure who was a cop or who just smelled like one, or who was a snitch and who might just be a misfit or an idiot. Then, 3 people hit on a plan. Steve explains, 3 of us who fairly trusted each other and wondered how bad we were compromised, had decided to try a test. We were a lot of loosely organized groups and a variety of hangers-on. Each of us met with some of these people and called a secret meeting. It was a cop's wet dream with guns, drugs, and heavy people promised. One of us went to each of these meetings, and it was only some of the people that told about it and a massive police presence at all of them. The smart people stayed at home. It became unpleasant when the feds, cops, and such realized it was a trick. It left me with a depressing feeling that it was next to impossible to put a heavyweight group of more than one person together without a snitch. And that was Zoomy. I think he wants to go outside. So let me scroll down a little bit here. Historical ways of dealing with known snitches. That would be like your neighbors who you know for a fact are snitches, or anybody else that you know for a fact is a snitch. It could be somebody online. It could be somebody who's leaving comments in your comment section. Since, as one wag observed, the first snitch arose shortly after the first secret, history offers us a lot of examples of how groups have handled the betrayers in their midst. We do not recommend any of these methods. On the contrary, we advise in the strongest terms possible against them. This is just to note how seriously people have historically taken those who betray them. But again, to be blunt, do not do any of this in big bold print. These examples are for historical and educational purposes only. And yes, I'm simply reading from a document, a book, by Claire Wolfe about rat snitches. The IRA used to shoot betrayers in the kneecaps. It wouldn't kill them, but everyone who saw a former activist lurching down the street on destroyed knees knew what he was. The mafia would famously send stool pigeons to sleep with the fishes. Okay, 1 minute, baby. 1 minute, I'm almost finished reading. Resistance groups, particularly during wartime, have been known to leave the bodies of betrayers in public squares with messages pinned to them or even carved in them. While still saying it's a bad idea, it did have the effect of discouraging the general populace from working with the enemy. So today, snitches and betrayers often see benefits and face nowhere near enough drawbacks for their dirty work. In the 1980s and 1990s, the African National Congress punished perceived collaborators with a monstrous method called necklacing. They'd shove a gasoline-filled tire over a miscreant's neck and arms and kill the person by setting the tire alight. Oh, that's horrible. That was the African National Congress. National Congress. Then in the 1980s and 1990s, and after World War II, many women who had slept with or otherwise collaborated with the Nazis were humiliated by having their hair hacked off, while mobs screamed, "Nazi horror!" This might not sound like much compared with beastly punishments like a necklacing, but public humiliation, shunning, and the attack on their femininity was hugely degrading and psychologically damaging. How do you treat an exposed snitch? Since you're not the mafioso, and since so far we're not in an outright shooting war with the enemy state, there's no justification for historical hardcore tactics. We'll say it again. Your best bet is to just get away from the snitch and take protective measures as described above. However, if you're very sure a person is a rat and you want to take further steps to render the snitch ineffective or miserable, here are some milder but potentially effective tactics. Again, we do not necessarily recommend any of these things. This is for educational purposes only. I'm merely reading a book. They may be good or bad ideas depending on the people and circumstances. They're just possibilities. Spread the word. Use social networks, both online and in the real world, to notify others that the person is an informant. Be as factual and give as much evidence as possible. There's even a website that contains a national database of known rats. But since it's a paid membership site, we're not recommending it. Do a startpage.com or DuckDuckGo search to find if you are interested. Post the snitch's photo, address, or other personal details online unless that violates a law in your area. And I actually do remember seeing a website like this, and it was a paid site. The strategy is, however, a serious two-edged sword, as those methods are one that may be used by agent provocateurs in attempting to damage a group by further destroying trust. In fact, such tactics may well end up with you being labeled, no matter how unfairly or inaccurately, as the snitch. In fact, removing competent and trustworthy personnel from a group is high on a snitch's to-do list, and this can be a gift from on high to snitch. Expel the person from the group. You can do this quietly, perhaps just by moving meetings and failing to inform the person of the new place. Or you can do it publicly, literally holding a purge or a type of trial where you present the evidence against the person. Organize a shunning. Shunning has historically been a huge tactic in close communities. Shunning means shutting a person and sometimes his family members out of virtually all ordinary activity. A target of shunning isn't welcome into people's homes, can't get served at restaurants, doesn't have his greetings returned, and can't get help from any of her former friends, and is generally unable to function within the community. And this is basically what the Fusion Center operatives do. They go into communities and spread a slanderous lie concocted by them because they have fused and collaborated all of the information, when the covert investigation started, where they're trashing, going through your trash and surreptitiously going through your email, contacting your family, friends, etc. So the target shunning isn't welcome into people's homes. Obviously, in many ways, this has become harder to do as we become less reliant on our towns and neighborhoods. And a lot of people don't even talk to their neighbors. On the other hand, the internet has made other non-traditional forms of shunning possible. Turn them into the legitimate authorities, quote unquote. We mentioned this option before as a means of protecting yourself and your true friends. The same tactic may work to halt the snitch in its tracks or even put it in jail. Snitches are often serious criminals. They may well end up to nefarious deeds that their handlers in the police departments or government agencies don't know. Or a snitch who's working for the local police department may be known to the FBI, who might be interested to learn other things he's up to. Again, we are very, very squeamish about the idea of turning in any non-violent, non-thieving person into any law enforcement agency. But, well, you'll need to judge for yourself what the snitch in your midst deserves. And, of course, do this through a lawyer. Don't talk directly to government agents. Fun and games. Again, this is a tactic we do not recommend. However, traditionally it's been used as a lovely bit of revenge and a way to keep snitches busy without letting them know you're already onto them. The idea is to keep the snitch running in circles with false leads. Set one snitch out spying on another, give the snitch false evidence to focus on while you go about your real business unmolested. We consider this to be a category of trying to, quote, outsmart the snitch, which is not wise, and you must be especially careful that you never put yourself in a position where you can be accused of lying to law enforcement, since you can go to prison for that, even when you're innocent in every other way. But such games can be fun while they last. Rehabilitate and take the snitch back into your circle. There are people who believe that some snitches, especially young, inexperienced people who get in over their heads, get in legal trouble, and are intimidated into becoming snitches, should be forgiven, rehabilitated, and even brought back into the fold of trust. A very humane anarchist, Tom Knapp, took this position when a young anti-drug war activist, Stacy Litz, Litz, was arrested and presumed into becoming a drug informant. Not many people sympathized, and Litz made her reputation worse with her online writings. But some very decent folks might want to open their arms to a reformed snitch. All we can say is, if you want to go that way, make damn sure the rat has actually reformed first and can prove it through actions, not mere words. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this segment of Rat Snitches by Claire Wolfe. And I'm going to end on that note. Please leave your comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this segment. And we'll continue reading this another time because I find it to be an interesting read.